under Reagan, who assumed emeritus status. Becky oversees special projects. She travels as an ambassador for heritage and works tirelessly to assure that the legacy of principles, policies, and practices represented by the life and service of Ronald Reagan remains in the hearts and minds of Americans. Previously, Dunlop was Heritage Vice President for External Relations from 1998 until May 2016. She served on the Trump transition team. Dunlop was a senior official in the Reagan administration from 1981 to 1989 inside the White House, at the Justice Department and at the Interior Department. She served from 1994 to 1998 as Secretary of Natural Resources for the Commonwealth of Virginia in the cabinet of then Virginia Governor George Allen. As Political Director for the American Conservative Union from 1973 to 1977, she was instrumental in organizing grassroots activities for Reagan's unsuccessful 1976 race for the Republican nomination and advised his successful 1980 nomination and general election campaign. So Becky understands the political process, and she's also been a grassroots activist. So she understands what it takes in terms of engagement. From Reagan's first inauguration in 1981 to 1985, White House posts included Deputy Assistant to the President for Presidential Personnel and Special Assistant to the President and Director of his Cabinet. During Reagan's second term, Dunlop served as Senior Special Assistant to Ed Meese, then Attorney General, in charge of managing cabinet-level domestic policy issues. She oversaw major policy reports on the environment, the family, federalism, tort reforms, privatization, and welfare reforms. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome Ms. Becky Norton Dunlop, a friend to address the issues of reform.
Well, thanks so much to the Foundation for Democracy in Africa for their continuing leadership and their foresight in creating and hosting African Do. And thank you, Fred and Tony, for inviting me to speak today. I want to thank also the leadership of Miami-Dade and Broward counties and some of the local community leaders and civic leaders from this area. You have always been important to the African Do project and initiative, and your role this year is especially appreciated given the hurricane that your community just experienced. And I want to extend a special thank you to the attendees. We are all aware of the commitment of time, talent, and treasure that you've expended to be here. I trust that you can return to your home community with new, useful information, a renewal of spirit, and a story of how this American community came together quickly to respond to nature's fury. We know Africa is a continent rich in natural resources with a wealth of human resources and tremendous potential. So it's very nice to see some of that represented here at African Do. I personally am delighted to be here at African Do once again to represent the Heritage Foundation. In fact, Fred, I have on the wall of my office back in Washington the promotional poster from 2003 to remind me every day of the can-do spirit of this conference and the people who attend and participate in it. Well, as some of you know, the Heritage Foundation is what we call in the United States a think tank. In plain words, we do research. We think about what we have found in our research, and then we identify policy ideas that solve problems and help people. And then we educate policymakers and people of influence like you about the research and the policy recommendations that we have discovered. Our hope and intent is that you and they will take these policy recommendations and seek laws and regulations, or sometimes repeal law and regulations, that will put these ideas into effect for the good of our citizens. The mission of Heritage is to advance policy ideas that are based on the principles of free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional values, and a strong national defense. These principles on which we base our policy ideas are essentially universal. So I hope that they resonate with you today, no matter where you live. Today I want to speak to you about a vision. People everywhere need a vision, an aspiration for circumstances that can make their lives better. A vision points us in the right direction, allows us to begin the process of reform. The good book says that without a vision, the people will perish. Today, our vision deals with reforms that are necessary to strengthen that supply chain that offers economic growth, jobs, and increased per capita income for you and your business. And these reforms will improve the governance of your local and national governments as well. We know that if you do what you have always done, you will get what you have always gotten. Well, we, the people in this room, we are about change. Change that will improve things. Reforms, in other words. We don't want what we have always gotten. We want to see things done differently, done better, for the good of one and all. And fortunately, the Heritage Foundation has produced its annual Index of Economic Freedom in partnership with the Wall Street Journal to actually provide some of the underlying foundational information that I think we need. The Heritage Foundation has been thinking about these issues for some time. And today I want to share with you our research and some policy directions that you, as leaders of civil society in your own countries, can champion. The index, the highlights of which we're going to hand out to you so that you can have these with you, is something that gives you a snapshot of what we're talking about here. This index supplies you with essential empirical data about what elements have been proven to affect economic freedom. And it provides important publicly available information about the state of economic freedom country by country. Now, the highlights discuss this in general terms, but the book actually has a page for every country in the world and talks about these economic principles and measures how things are going in each country. We're going to provide copies of these books to leaders who are visiting us from Africa as soon as we finish this event this noon. Well, this research, when you look at this research, what you will see is a blueprint for reform for each country, and it emerges on the pages of this book. If you want to strengthen the supply chain, what are the reforms that need to be addressed in your country? I might say, by the way, that there are reforms that need to be pursued in the United States. So you can be sure that the Heritage Foundation looks inward as well as outward. There is always a need for reform, no matter what country you're in. Let me highlight today, though, just 3 key lessons that our research has shown that most directly affects the discussions of this conference. Number 1, countries that encourage private ownership of property through effective titling and registration with honest and even-handed judicial protection encourage more entrepreneurial initiative than do countries that require collective or government ownership of economic resources. Number 2, governments that impose heavy taxation or that incur excessive debt to fund high levels of government spending crowd out private economic activity and job-creating investment. And number 3, a consistently applied regulatory scheme that encourages competition and dispersed decision-making, innovation, productivity gains, and economic efficiency promotes a better allocation of resources than is achieved by systems of central planning. Now, I suspect that some of you are already identifying with these points, and you are seeing clearly some reforms that might be beneficial in your own situations. Now, you would not be here at Afro-Can-Do if you were not already a leader in civil society in your country. And that is good, because reforms most often begin with you and the civil society organizations that you help to lead. As you consider actions that might need to be taken in your country to do things differently in these 3 policy areas that I've mentioned, I want to also touch briefly on 3 vital elements necessary for reform that leaders must keep foremost in their minds. Individuals. Individuals. People are our most important, precious, and unique resource. All that we do, all that governments do, should focus on how we can provide the circumstances, the environment, and the protections that will allow people to prosper, that will allow people to engage in activities to better themselves and their families and their communities, and yes, their nations. Individuals are important. Integrity. We must be people of integrity, and we must demand the same in our fellow business leaders and in our government officials. This is one reason that an independent judiciary is so very important. Citizens, no matter what country they live in, must have the confidence in the rule of law. Traits such as transparency, competency, and accountability, defense of property rights, and equal application of the law are essential. Individuals and integrity. And then initiative. Personal initiative is the difference between rising expectations, success, and dare I say it, happiness, versus mediocrity, failure, and frustration. Our goal as individual leaders in business or government, or in our community and families, should be to foster an atmosphere in which we, our fellow citizens, and our family members can dream big dreams, make plans, and execute our ideas that can allow us to live our lives according to our values and our standards, care for our families, and provide the goods and services that we have created that we can willingly offer for sale and a willing buyer can purchase without unnecessary bureaucracy, overbearing taxes, and unfair regulation. Individuals, integrity, and initiative. Three things that are absolutely essential to economic growth and success in business. Well, my message to you today may seem to be from the high-flying 30,000-foot level, but when you think about it, looking from this level can allow you to see not only where we are today, but where we can go. If our research information is sound, our vision is clear, our plan is well conceived, and our commitment is sure. We at the Heritage Foundation know that you are focused on your family and your business. We are honored to be here at Africa Can Do to provide you with some of the sound research that will be helpful to you as you plan for those reforms in your country that can advance your journey successfully in the days, months, and years ahead. Thank you so much for being here. May God bless you in your work, and have a wonderful rest of this conference.
Thank you very much, Becky. And I think the message is loud and clear. Clear vision allows us to reform. Reform brings change. Change that allows things to get better. Countries that encourage private property rights, they always thrive. Countries that go out, overburden citizens with high taxes, always hurt and crowd out the private enterprise. The individual is the background of every organization. And that is why, in fact, when we started the U.S. Africa Trade and Investment Forum in 1996, we looked at the word Africa and we took out of it the can-do element of it. And that's why I'm always very proud to wear this button. It talks about I can do. If I can do, which as an individual, and from my point of view, if I am able to do those things that I need to do with integrity and with clear vision, and the people that I interface with also as individuals can do the same, then we can do. And it's only when we can do that we could use those assets that we have to allow Africa to do. And so it's a personal message that I think underscores some of what Becky has shared with us, which is the power of the individual. And the fact that even though we do have government that we have entrusted with some rights to be able to represent us, it is our responsibility to always ensure that we are always, as individuals, we are in charge. Thank you very much again, Becky, for the message. We are very honored to have you. Becky has been very involved in helping us in terms of the economic freedom element of our work. And so the foundation is an embodiment of values. Those values that we believe would allow the free enterprise to thrive. The values that would allow individuals to be able to perform and be able to provide the best for every community wherever they are. Because in the final analysis, the rule of law should always prevail. Where there is rule of law, there is light in the room. And where there is light in the room, there is always few rooms for chaos. So we can have problems, but we can address those problems. And that is actually what human civilization over so many decades that we have been here, in areas that we have thrived, has always been based on. We thank you very much for your message. I also want to thank Kim Peterson to share with us how some of our individual empowerment should be used in reforming our policy to ensure that there is peace and security, not only where we live, but even among our trading partners. Because it is only when we can bring those elements of trust, of integrity, and relationships that would evolve into strategic alliances that allows nation and people to be able to work in harmony and be able to create wealth, create peace, and be able to nourish the values that brings prosperity among us. We've had a very good opening session today, and I think our two keynote speakers, and our earlier keynote speaker in the morning, talked about what do we do in communities where we ensure that individual empowerment, particularly in the economic front and the political front, become tools that we use in building community, in building enterprises, in making sure that the civilization continues to move forward. So please join me in giving both of our keynote speakers another round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, CD. Thank you very much for your message. This message is the most takeaway from every Africano that we bring. The workshops are important, but the real takeaway is those values. How do we go back to our community, and how do we transform our community? And it's not about giving a man a fish, it's about teaching a man how to fish. It's very easy to give fish, but it is very difficult to know how to continue to have the fish and the type of fish that you have. And the core value that the Foundation for Democracy in Africa often brings to the table is not the size of our purse, is not the size of our team, but the values that we think we can share with all of our affiliates and partners. Now, in the interest of making sure that all of our stakeholders are fully informed, I'm going to ask Ms. Patricia Sek to please give us an abridged version in French. We will have a very short question and answer session because this is just too important for us not to have an opportunity to interface with these very important speakers. And after that, we will now go back to the expo floor, and we'll be able to spend the rest of our day today working among ourselves in terms of that value chain enhancement, value chain strengthening that we are all here for. Thank you very much.
Merci. Nous avons aujourd'hui deux intervenants de qualité. Monsieur Kim E. Peterson, qui est un expert de la sécurité antiterrorisme. Il a beaucoup travaillé en Afrique et au Moyen-Orient. Il a travaillé au Sénat américain et au Pentagone. Il nous entretient sur la sécurité commerciale. Qu'est-ce qui doit être fait des deux côtés de l'Atlantique en termes d'approvisionnement et de sécurité maritime? Il fallait renforcer la sécurité de tous les ports après le 11 septembre. Après les événements du 11 septembre qui ont eu lieu à New York, il fallait renforcer la sécurité de tous les ports. Après plusieurs inspections en Afrique, M. Peterson dit qu'il a noté que les ports africains souffrent encore d'un problème de résilience. La plupart de ces ports n'ont pas la mesure des menaces et n'appliquent pas encore la norme ISPS Code. Son expérience lui permet d'affirmer que le savoir-faire n'a pas été partagé entre les États-Unis et l'Afrique. Le plan d'Al-Qaïda était d'attaquer tous les ports, y compris les ports africains, en attaquant les bateaux. ISP Code est un système qui aide à réduire les coûts, les pertes et permet d'être compétitif dans la région. Beaucoup d'argent ont été investis pour diminuer les menaces. Et il a noté également que la vigilance de la sécurité des ports en Afrique souffre beaucoup. Il y a de nouveaux modèles de terrorisme utilisés aussi par de nouvelles technologies pour attaquer les systèmes de sécurité tous les jours. Ils ciblent les cargos de marchandises de grande valeur, ils payent des employés pour voler les informations et les vendre aux ennemis. On ne peut pas prétendre tout protéger sur un port, mais il faudrait identifier les gros risques et savoir maîtriser, établir les standards de sécurité. M. Peterson dit également que les Chinois ont investi plus de 115 milliards de dollars, investissent plus de 115 milliards de dollars par an sur les infrastructures de route en Afrique, y compris les ports. Ils veulent apporter un environnement sécuritaire pour les affaires, le transport, le fret, et pour barrer la voie au développement des échanges commerciaux entre l'Afrique et les pays d'Afrique subsaharienne. Et comme l'a dit Fred, nous sommes tous concernés par cette question de sécurité et tous les pays doivent s'y atteler pour ne pas être vulnérables afin de garantir la sécurité des biens, des peuples et des échanges. Madame Becky Norton Dunlop, elle est travaille avec la Fondation Héritage. Elle travaille pour cette fondation depuis longtemps. Elle est ambassadrice pour les valeurs laissées par Ronald Reagan et elle travaille pour que ces valeurs-là se pérennisent. Elle comprend ce que c'est que l'engagement et a parlé de la question des réformes. Nous savons que l'Afrique a d'abondantes ressources et un capital humain indéniable. La Fondation Héritage est un think tank. Nous faisons des recherches et réfléchissons sur les travaux que nous faisons. Nous réfléchissons sur les trouvailles que nous faisons après nos recherches pour en faire des feuilles de route, des recommandations, des codes de conduite, des réformes. Elle parle aujourd'hui de la vision. Les peuples partout ont eu une vision. Sans la vision, le peuple périt. Tout le monde dans cette salle veut voir les choses faites différemment. Madame Becky Norton voudrait partager avec nous des informations sur la liberté économique. Je pense que ce sont ces petits livres qu'elle vous a donnés. Elle voudrait partager avec nous des informations sur la liberté économique afin qu'ils puissent nous guider dans la pratique et la mise en œuvre des réformes sur la chaîne d'approvisionnement, quel que soit le pays. Il y a quelques points essentiels en termes de réforme. Il faut observer les pays qui encouragent l'entrepreneuriat privé. Il faut observer les pays qui, en termes de régulation, encouragent la compétitivité des entreprises. Il faut tenir compte des individus, des peuples qui sont des ressources. Les gouvernements doivent encadrer dans l'intégrité en favorisant les initiatives. La Fondation Héritage est à votre disposition pour échanger les informations sur la réforme. Merci pour votre attention.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So please, this is so important. We will open the floor for 4 or 5 questions, if there are any questions, to Mr. Kim Peterson, to Ms. Becky Dunlop, and also to Mr. C.D. Glean, who we had the opportunity to listen to this morning. So please raise your hand, we'll bring the mic, and we will entertain those questions if there are any.
nation Republican in America. So my question is for Ms. Dunlop. Did you take part in the President's speech at United Nations the other day? Did you contribute to it? I'm raising this question because it pains some of us Africans that live in America, that are American citizens, in terms of personal enterprise, rule of law, all the principles that you enumerated in your document. But there's a missing link. And I've been trying to see if I could get somebody in Washington to really ask this question. So fortunately, you're here, you're Washington that I can reach. Part of why we're here is to foster trade between Africa and the United States. It's like everybody knows, trade is important for economic growth. It's important. And in Africa, small, medium-sized enterprises outnumber the big corporations. But they are being weighed down by bad governance. The Western world cannot tell me that they do not know that governance is the problem in Africa. The Western world had an advantage. Public goods we have developed. Public goods. These people here cannot provide public goods. And me and you know what public goods are. Without public goods, without infrastructure, basic education, basic medical facilities, rule of law, we can promote trade between Africa and the United States. It's only the big multinationals who are doing good business. Shell is not complaining of doing business. Exxon is not complaining of doing business in Africa. God, they got the muscle. They got the resources. They can provide the missing infrastructure, which the small enterprises cannot do. So I'm a little bit worried why, if U.S. was able to provide a Marshall Plan to Europe that provided all the basic infrastructures for people now to thrive on personal enterprise, why is that not a discussion in Washington by think tanks and policy bodies like Heritage Enterprise? I really would like to have that discussion because that's part of the missing infrastructure. Common goods are not available in most African countries. South Africa has infrastructure. They are doing good business with America. AGOA program, South Africa is benefiting more than any other African country. Why? Because they have infrastructure, they have common goods. I do business in 15 African countries from California. It is tough. If I was not a Nigerian American, I wouldn't do it. It is tough. So my point and my question, and maybe it's not for public, it's for later discussion, the U.S. government has to look into this issue of bad governance. It is not enough to say that the people will rise and speak their minds, have all these advocacy groups, but the people are being weighed down. Thank you.
Well, this is obviously. Have a mic on here? Okay. So, my mic does not seem to be on. Obviously, your message is not something that we can have a discussion on here at this point, as you indicated. I just will make just a couple quick points. One, no, I had nothing to do with the Trump speech at the UN. I do think that a lot of the heritage principles were incorporated into the Trump speech at the UN, which we appreciated. And I was delighted that he actually hosted a luncheon with African leaders at the UN, and I forwarded on to Fred those remarks, which I think, to your point, encouraged trade and pointed out some of the governance challenges that African countries are facing. For our own part at the Heritage Foundation, we will continue to raise issues. I will say that one of the things that we did, which we thought was a very important advancement, we recommended Fred Oladende to be appointed Assistant Secretary of State for Africa. And the President hasn't listened to us in that regard yet. But that would be a fine move to raise some of these issues to the front. But I will say the United States of America, both our companies and our government, have certain responsibilities with respect to Africa. But the people in the several African countries have got to get the principles down right. And then they have to stand up and speak. And in some countries in Africa, their voices are being heard, reforms are occurring, and therefore more trade will occur. So we all have to work together in these matters, and we're just delighted to be here to be an encouragement and to say we're allies in Washington, D.C. for these kinds of principles so that small business as well as large business can have interaction with businesses in Africa.
Testing. Okay, my voice is not as eloquent as the gentleman here, but thank you. He raised a few concerns. My name's Eric. I'm entering the world market for patented fertilizers to increase agricultural yield for farmers worldwide and in the U.S. And there's just, I'll be brief with my questions, but they do pertain to the aspect of security and trade development. They're just, I believe, the panel that we're talking about. Number one, the first concern I find in my industry is nitrogen. And nitrogen in liquid or solid form is used by bad people to make bombs and terrorize other citizens. When people like me export these products to other countries to help develop a better environmental impact on their products, it's twisted around in a negative way. So there are regulations in ways such as UN codes, and the US has recently increased its demand to know who is the end user of a product. There's no problem with that, it's just legal compliance. My question comes down to, where does Africa stand in regards to its participation in security measures? Will it stand by, will it let the US handle that aspect, or will the African Union adapt its security measures in that sense, given the nature of their political sphere? The other aspect I had was Exim Bank, which he also raised an analytic point. Multinationals, for example, such as Monsanto, which is worldwide known, has no problem finding financing, has no problem entering any world market. It walks into a place, governments throw out a red carpet. Any small, medium business such as myself would have to go through more of a tedious task. For example, South Africa requires you to have a African-based partner, or 51% of it, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, owned by a South African. Now, I've never been to South Africa, and so I wouldn't know any South African who I can set up that structure with. Same thing with a partner I'm developing in Guinea, Angola, Tanzania. It doesn't matter what country in Africa you go to, there are these legal requirements to partner with 51% of someone from that nation. So my concern is, how do you develop these partnerships to comply with that nation, which I wish to expand business to, and help further progress, as he says, common goods? But at the same time, we have the backball where it's like we're used to the Western form of business as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I'm going to ask if anyone of our panelists would like to take that question regarding nitrogen and the export and import movement of fertilizer and how it affects the supply chain security. Kim, you want to help us out on that? Yeah, he's on.
With regard to your concern about UN categories of precursor chemicals, that's an issue that has been outstanding for a number of years. For those of you that aren't aware of it, there are a number of products and raw materials that are coded based on their potential lethality. So you have the highest code, which is UN Category 1.1, which are high explosives, and then it goes down from there. And I'm not sure what the category is of, is it liquid nitrogen or nitrogen-based fertilizers, or?
Well, the nitrogen that I sell is actually stable, but it's considered, I believe, 117 something, so 1702, something like that. And so because it is a nitrogen, but because it's a nano-nitrogen and the UN doesn't recognize nanotechnology, therefore I have to be categorized as a volatile explosive, but in reality, you cannot actually, and it's liquid, yes, and solid. Either one does not react to fire, but still it is considered just because it is that chemical compound in there. So
you're not the only one that is having to deal with that. I can say that at Port Everglades, and I don't know if our colleague from Port Everglades is still here, but they have extraordinarily high restrictions associated with any of a number of the UN category items, and oftentimes it's political. I know that in the case of some Florida ports, the Coast Guard is asked to make a determination, and the determination is ultimately decided by someone who's not an expert in the field. They have great latitude insofar as what they're going to allow in, when it's going to arrive, and unfortunately, I think this is more of a political issue than it is a security issue, and I wish you luck.
Thank you.
CD, you have?
No, I wasn't going to comment on the nitrogen, but I just wanted to say, in terms of countries, your question and concern around countries having, whether it's local content laws or laws that prohibit individuals coming in, establishing business without a joint venture with someone on the ground. I mean, I think the starting point is sort of where you are. I have a friend who answered that question by saying, sort of, get a plane ticket and get on the ground and meet with the American Chamber of Commerce in country or any sort of entity that's on the ground in various African countries. But I think, this forum, you said, South Africa, been in South Africa, you don't know any South African businesses or any, this kind of forums that sort of bring together businesses, small and medium-sized businesses that are doing business in Africa is sort of a good starting point to at least begin to socialize and find potential business partners and business opportunities. But also there are a number of organizations, the Corporate Council on Africa in Washington, D.C. is a must, and Fred would definitely concur with this, is a must, participate or attending their trade and investment forums where they do take American businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises to various African countries to do exactly as you stated as your challenge of meeting local businesses and local operators for you to potentially partner with or collaborate with. And then I would say what I said this morning, that we are in, as the U.S. African Development Foundation, in the startup, in the early stage business of creating enterprises that have a demand, a need for fertilizers, nitrogen-based, phosphate-based, or what have you, for yield improvements. And so having the opportunity to sort of meet with potential procurers of your goods and services is another way to look at potential business opportunities. But I would say the starting point is where you are, and that you have to do a lot of the legwork of getting to know the market research 101, but also getting to know potential buyers and partners and collaborators who may be able to support your business in their country. There's more and more, now more than ever, there are a lot of organizations that are trying to bring African business to meet American small and medium-sized enterprises. And so I would just say that you're going to be more successful now than you would have been 5 years ago, so it's possible.
Thank you very much.
One more thing. Thanks. You know, my firm has done a lot of business around the world, and you sometimes run into this issue where there has to be minimum ownership, and typically, as you said, it's 51% ownership by a national of the country that you're doing business with, and how you get around that. And depending on the country, there are some workarounds for it. And the problem for you as an entrepreneur is going to be, well, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to finance this entire operation, everything is really on my back, but I've got to have somebody there who's going to own 51% of this joint enterprise. Why do I give up that kind of equity for minimal participation? And one way that it can be done, depending on the country, is you lend that individual the equity to buy into the company. So what you do is you set up a new company and you say, okay, well, the company's going to be worth $1 million, and I'm going to provide you with 51% of the equity, and I'm going to lend you the money to buy that equity from me. So no money actually exchanges, but you write out a note that says that they owe you $500,000, $500,001, and at the time of the dissolution of the company or any other event where their ownership is transferred, they're obliged to repay you for the equity that you provide them on the front end. Thank you.
Derek. Yeah, Mr. Glenn talked about the protein content for the vegetarians. You know, this is the technology that could be used to accelerate the growth of nitrogen incorporation into amino acid production. That is the technology, so that they can become cheaper to purchase.
Thank you
That's
very
right.
much. And Eric, I think you're welcome to Africando. I think this is the right place to be, and you'll be able to talk with some of these entrepreneurs. And as Sidi also talked about, he has some of his staff here on the ground that will be able to inform you if there's a way that you can interface into what they're doing in Africa. But Casey, I wanted to get the opportunity to kind of give a little answer to your question. As you know, one of the important benefit from your point of view, from my point of view, from Becky and everybody in this room, is that there is an eligibility requirement for AGOA, which compels those countries that want to be AGOA eligible to meet certain standards. These are some of the requirements that have been put in place. But again, I think the message in here is that even when those compliance are being required, the capacity, the ability to use the vision on the ground to get the reform that you've talked about would have to happen organically in Nigeria, in Zambia, in the Cameroons. As much as our policy can help induce, it is the people on the ground that actually can get the results that we want. And that is why our policy, the US policy, should always be to empowering the individual as much as we can, in a way that those values will be reflected in their way of thinking and in the choices that they have a right to make. So when those choices are made, either by casting their ballot, or when those choices are made by going into referendum or making debates, that they will carry the day. But it's going to be very difficult, and I do understand the whole values around the Marshall Plan. It was a terrible world war. Things were down. And so the ability to help to rebuild so that we can move. And I think there are different forms of Marshall Plans that we could look at now. But I think it's that of economic freedom and trying to help the private enterprises on the ground. Just like CD's group is doing. Going on the ground, empowering people so that they can empower their family and that they can create their own wealth and be able now to use that vision to reform their government. It's going to be always work in progress, but that's important. And I appreciate very much Heritage Foundation support in terms of trying to get me to be with the administration. And if I do have the opportunity, it's very clear that my vision of what we are looking for in terms of values, in terms of change, will be reflected in the kind of messaging that the administration would have on the ground. And what we're looking for is not really giving people fish, but we want to go out and work with people so that they can navigate their own little streams, their own big rivers, and be able to understand the fish that is there. They can nurture them, and then they can use that for nourishment. And I think that is the only way that we can really become part of this global reform, by using ideas to bring the change that we all want to see. We'll take one or two more questions, and then I think after this we'll go to the expo floor so that we can start the business-to-business interaction.
Ok. Merci, monsieur. Et je voudrais parler de la menace de la sécurité maritime internationale en Somalie et au Nigeria. En Somalie par les Shebab, au Nigeria par Boko Haram.
I would like to talk about the threat of maritime security in Somalia and
au Nigeria
in Nigeria
par Boko Haram.
By Boko Haram.
Et ces menaces n'ont que trop duré. Et les Africains s'étonnent de la passivité de la communauté internationale face à ces menaces.
Those threats have lasted long, and they are just wondering the passivity. They don't really, it looks like the world does not care about what is going on. It has lasted long enough. That threat from those groups, Boko Haram.
Et quand on sait que le Nigeria est le géant de l'Afrique noire et que nous voyons à longueur de journée les menaces qui sévissent dans ce territoire, cela décourage les Africains dans leur combat contre la pauvreté dans nos pays respectifs.
And we know that Nigeria is the giant of Africa. So now that the whole world is just passive, they don't really look at it as such a problem. That discourages the Africans, because they thought that the world will come, to take care of this type of problem, but they are not. So Africans are left by themselves, they are discouraged, they don't know what else.
Alors, je voudrais savoir, au nom du droit maritime international, est-ce que les puissances ne peuvent pas conjuguer leurs forces pour nous libérer de ces djihadistes afin que l'Afrique puisse retrouver le chemin de son développement économique? Je vous remercie.
And I'm wondering what the whole world is going to do. Western civilization, Western powers, what can they do to eliminate that so that we can be back to our own way as we used to be?
Thank you. This is
Thank
a
you.
good question, and I'm sure we have people here who really can address that question very well.
When you look at the issue of piracy off the coast of Somalia and contrasting that with Nigeria, the actors that are involved have gone from having minor political disputes to now becoming organized and supported by regional terrorist groups. But if you look at the number of piratical events that have occurred, we've seen a dramatic drop in the past 4 years in the number of incidents off the coast of Somalia, principally because there is now political agreement to allow the ship carriers, the sea carriers, to have armed staff on board the vessels, which was prohibited in the first several years, where vessels were being seized on an average of 1 every 2 weeks. what first occurred in Nigeria, of course, was presented as disgruntled fishermen who were seeing their fisheries being depleted by foreign vessels that were intruding on their economic zone. And out of protest, they began to seize ships. But that has changed now, and you now have political actors, terrorist groups, that are orchestrating the few ship seizures that we've seen in the past 12 months. And that's a very small number compared to what it was 3 years ago, for example. It's my understanding, however, that in the case of Nigeria and other Western African states, that there is still no agreement to allow shipping companies to place armed individuals on board to protect their vessels from seizure. So I suggest that the solution is going to lie in recognizing the successes that have occurred in Somalia and applying the same allowances to take place in Nigeria.
Alors, s'ils permettaient ça, il y aurait cette chute d'attaque sur les bateaux, comme ça s'est fait en Somalie.
Thank you very much. I think now we'll take one and the last question so that we can go for the business-to-business networking.
Good afternoon, everybody. In addition to what you said about the maritime law in Nigeria, now the shipping companies are allowed to hire gunboats to go with the vessels.
But it's my understanding that they have to be Nigerian and that they can't be, for example, Maersk is hiring U.S. former military personnel who are armed with both sniper rifles and automatic long arms. It's my understanding that in Nigeria they restrict the nationalities and type of weapons, and it is both confusing and difficult for these foreign shipping companies to meet the requirements.
I think the middle ground for that is most companies now have like special purpose vehicles where the international companies join with the Nigerian companies to do that business because of the Nigerian requirements. But I'm aware that now the vessels can have gunboats system.
So actually, they don't have armed personnel on board, but they have guns.
They are attached to the vessel. Yeah, like they're like smaller boats.
Right.
Yeah.
And that.
It's more expensive actually, but
well,
that's what we have right now.
And it brings revenue to Nigeria.
Exactly.
But it doesn't speak to the issue of what happens when those vessels are outside of the
Nigerian waters.
The Nigerian legal limits at sea, and not all of these seizures have occurred within Nigerian waters.
Yeah.
So it's a larger problem, and I understand that the genesis for this is that there are countries that are concerned that what could be described as mercenaries could be bringing weapons into their own countries.
Exactly.
And so they're very sensitive to the idea that Europeans or others are on vessels transiting their waters with automatic weapons. So I understand the history there. But the solution is probably going to be something closer to what exists currently off of Somalia than what we have today.
But I think that's the process, and we're getting there. Really, my question is about about the security dynamics. You mentioned the ISPS code being a little outdated and quite expensive, and from what I got from what you said, it seemed like it's